Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the seriously crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. Mikka is joining me tonight. It's Phil Bakke, and it's a little bit of a different intro because we stand Dance Gavin Dance. I mean, Mikka, this is a band that's been around for a while, and we talk a bit about, but wanted to have a little bit of fun with the intro there.
They're a band that have as many lineup changes as a USL club, so it works.
That's a good shout.
Rip headphone users.
Yep. No, you're gonna be feeling that one. I'm excited for the reaction from some of the regular listeners who hit play and just have that through their speakers immediately. So
on their morning commutes or whatever.
So good morning to anyone listening to this first thing. I'm sure you're awake now if you weren't already, but we've got tons to talk about today, Mikka. I mean, obviously, as I failed to mention, we're a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network, as we have been, and we're presented by Roughneck Scarves and Icarus FC. Icarus, I think it's worth mentioning, like, Icarus just continued to drop heat on the timeline. Whether it's, lower league clubs or concept kits, like, these guys are just undefeated.
Oh yeah, and I mean they have so many like creative ideas. I mean, especially with like the Sumerian Premier League, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think Babylonian, but yeah.
Oh, Babylonian,
like
duh.
Ancient Premier League.
One of those. Antiquity Premier League, I don't know. I would love it if they did Locomotives kits one day in the future, but we'll see about that.
It is a big show. Lots to talk about. We're going to start off with a little bit of non-Locomotive talk. Big Champions League and Europa League games that went on. We've also got new additions to Locomotive coming in. We've got the match against Monarchs, the 1-0 win to recap. And we've also got, we got to talk about Group C a little bit, see where Locomotive stand, and then maybe some breaking news later in the show, a little bit of
scoops,
little teaser there. And then we'll obviously talk about the game, the Colorado Switchbacks game this weekend in Colorado Springs. But to start all off, Champions League, I mean, we've got a final now. A little bit happened, or I'd say a lot happened between since the last time we spoke about the Champions League. Bayern obviously find their way to the final, but the route that they took to get there in terms of the demolition of Barcelona, I mean, who could have seen that coming?
I mean, all the experts were saying that Bayern were going to smash Barcelona, but I don't think anyone could have predicted an 8-2 scoreline. I mean, that's a disgrace, honestly, for a club like Barcelona, for any club competing in the Champions League. I mean, it's just FC Barcelona have been in shambles for a very long time now, and this, if anything, will force them to reevaluate and reassess where they're going. They've already wasted Lionel Messi's prime years, in my opinion. Bartomeu is cleaning house. I think Eric Abidal is already out. Quique Setien fired. Didn't even last a year in the job, and I don't even think really. I mean, there's probably something he could have done to prevent an 8-2 thrashing, but overall, I don't think really any of this is just his fault.
Right.
And now they're saying that Messi wants to leave. So the first summer transfer window during a global pandemic, and Lionel Messi wants to leave. I mean, that's insane. The guy that broke, and I forget his name at the moment, the journalist that broke the story about Neymar going to PSG is the one that's breaking this one. So,
right.
That could be a thing. Some people are saying that Messi might just be trying to throw his weight around and force early elections to get Bartomeu out because, as some of you might know, FC Barcelona are fan owned, and so the socis, or the socios in Spanish, are the ones that vote for the leadership at the club. So, I mean, there's just so much going on there that, I mean, Barcelona's mess overshadowed how well Bayern played. It's kind of almost a shame, but I doubt Bayern care. I'm sure they're just glad to be through it, and they beat Lyon today as well. So there we go.
Yeah. Barcelona, you said, this is now kind of forcing the clear out. It's crazy to me that it took, a collapse in the Champions League against Roma 2 years ago, then against Liverpool, kind of same story, total collapse against them, and then now I don't think you can even call it a collapse, but just utter capitulation in Portugal against Bayern. And Bayern being the better team, I think a lot of people have kind of tipped Bayern as the favorites for this competition. But 8-2 is just, I mean, I joked that Barcelona, doesn't even exist after this result. And I think as much of a joke as that is, I think in a lot of ways, Barcelona as we know it doesn't exist at this precise moment. The Barcelona we're used to doesn't really exist, but it does overshadow a little bit the other results that went on in that quarterfinal, and Lyon defeating Manchester City to make it to the semis is obviously a stunning result, and another blow to Pep's ambitions to win a Champions League with City, which is, I mean, essentially not dissimilar to Ronaldo at Juve. He was really brought to City to win Champions Leagues. So do you estimate that Pep is and I know this is going to sound harsh for a guy who's won tons of trophies at City, is he a failure if he doesn't get a Champions League with them?
Absolutely. That's what he was brought in for. And to be fair, City have been building this project specifically with the idea of Pep Guardiola leading it eventually.
Right.
It was in the making many years before he even came, because they knew that they wanted that guy. And so I think, he would be a failure if he doesn't win the Champions League, because that's what he was brought in for, as you say. But I also don't think I think Pep is really unique. He's in a unique situation in that I don't think he has the same pressure that he would at another club, where he would absolutely be maybe facing the sack. I don't think that's even a question right now with City. I think they're still very much committed to him, and that's their guy. But considering all the money they've spent, especially in comparison to Lyon, is ridiculous. So I don't know. I mean, they're going to drop another 800 million pounds this summer. I mean, I don't, what do you do? He, once again, he picked some really strange formation that City hadn't been playing all season long. And then they decided to switch it up for this game, which I don't know if you were paying too much respect to the opponent, or I hate to use the trope, but overthinking it,
Right. But
you do have to ask those questions when you have as much resources as they do at Manchester City, and they fail again, on the biggest stage. Speaking
of throwing money around, PSG also find their way to the final. A good win against Atalanta. I mean, your boys put up a hell of a fight in keeping that one close, and we almost had a storybook semifinal between Atalanta and RB Leipzig, but it ended up being PSG, and then eventually, I mean, they just took care of business against Leipzig ultimately in this one. Do you think it was just Leipzig kind of ran out of gas, or, I mean, did you see something different from PSG in this matchup that could elevate them past Bayern, for that, because they've been chasing the Champions League as well in this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they do finally look like a team with a bit of mental strength to them, and a bit of resilience that you might not have seen under Unai Emery or Laurent Blanc, or any of the previous managers before Thomas Tuchel came in. Neymar obviously is a difference maker. He's in sensational form. He's getting so many chances that he's missing a lot of them. But they were able to pretty much dominate RB Leipzig, with Mbappe, in my estimation, pretty much being invisible for most of the match. And that's not to have a go at him. I think he's still not 100% fit. and they probably should have subbed him a little bit earlier, save him for the final. But yeah, there's something to this PSG squad that they haven't had in recent years, and maybe this is their chance. But they're coming up against a Bayern side that look unstoppable, even though I would actually countenance that they haven't been playing their very best football the past 2 matches in the Champions League. So
Bayern is a crazy case because they've only been held to less than 3 goals in 1 match in the entire Champions League campaign, in which they have won every game. And that match was actually against Olympiacos of all teams. They still won 2-0, but that was on the road in Greece, was the only time that they were held to less than 3 goals, and they kept a clean sheet. So it's a juggernaut in Europe right now, and Bayern will certainly, I think, be the favorites. But as you said, PSG's form is going to keep them on their toes a little bit, and we should, if all things go according to current form, we could have just an absolutely scintillating final.
Yeah, I mean, it could end up being a lot of goals because Bayern are playing with this scarily high line, which you saw Lyon get behind it a couple times. You saw PSG get behind it, and Barcelona too. Barcelona had a couple chances and did put away 2 of them, getting behind that really high line. I think Bayern probably get away with that because they've got pace back there, especially with Alphonso Davies, who's just been a revelation. But yeah, I mean, this could end up being quite the shootout. So, and to be fair, I know, of course, Liverpool won the Champions League last season, but it wasn't exciting of a final. So I think that this matchup is really, really interesting, especially for the neutral.
Yeah. And I think the format ultimately, kind of favored these deep teams that are able to really make differences across a 90 minutes. But ultimately, I mean, especially today, as we saw, as you said, Lyon got behind a couple of times. It was Bayern. It was really Neuer, who I think many have estimated has falling off the last few seasons. Mm-hmm. Him coming out off his line, him kind of being vintage Neuer, kept the clean sheet initially, and then obviously Bayern put the game away. And the underlying story for this, just to bring it back to obviously the Liverpool fan perspective, if Bayern win this Champions League final, due to a clause in the transfer of Coutinho to Barcelona, Barcelona would actually owe 5 million euros as a bonus in the payout to Liverpool, which just shows kind of the mess that Barca is in, to really put an exclamation point on that side of things.
So much happened in that fixture that I didn't even remember to say that Coutinho scored 2 goals and assisted 1 against his parent club. I mean, that is just... And now they're trying to pawn him off on Arsenal, which, I mean, we'll see. I think Coutinho is still a very talented player, but it just hasn't worked out for him at Barcelona. But yeah, that's crazy. 5 million euros. I mean, Barcelona they need a complete overhaul. Bartomeu is cleaning house when really he should be the one leaving. Honestly, Barcelona under his custodianship has been just a joke, complete joke.
Well, talking about transfer business as we transition into the Locomotive talk on this podcast, we did have a couple new additions to the roster in the past week. Actually, just mere hours after we got off the phone with Mark last week, we added Mikka King, a right back from Indy 11. Looks a pretty dynamic right back, can definitely deliver a ball in, and does have an assist for Indy already this season. But what do you make of this addition of the young English right back? Are we going for? Is Mark really going for a Liverpool combination? Like, is he going to sign a Scottish left back now to really mirror things? Like, what do you make of this in light of the fact that obviously we've seen Brian Rebellon made that position his own last season. Memo has stepped in his absence and gotten a lot of kind of press recently. So what do you make of Mikka joining at this point of Locomotive's campaign?
Yeah, I mean, when Mark said that some of these moves wouldn't make sense right now, he wasn't kidding, because it's become almost a meme at this point that every time there's an announcement, it's a defender. But as to Mikka King himself, I mean, I'm totally fine with the addition. He's got experience in this league, which is always good. I did ask a Indy 11 fan online about him. I said, what should we know about him? Seems like he may end up being an option in midfield for us. And this person said he's a pretty solid player, not great, not bad. I think his issue was 11's pace. Indy 11 had built a roster with speed to spare. So, having heard that, it does give me a little bit of concern, because I'm constantly talking about how we could be a little bit more athletic. So maybe he won't add to that side of our game, but as far as depth is concerned, I mean, it's a perfectly fine transfer, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of online conversations, I guess, I have an ongoing thing with Brian Cook, an Indy 11 fan, and he has his own show, No Mean Soccer, and his take was he really likes Mikka, and he was basically, they just had too much depth at right back that he wasn't getting as many games. But he also lamented the transfer of Dylan Mahrez. So I'm counting Brian's loss as our gain, and he should be a good player if he can follow in the shoes of Dylan. Then we could have a heck of a player on our hands. But I'm sure obviously it'll take a little bit of time to adapt to the way we play, and certainly we play a little bit different from Indy out in the East, because we've seen a big difference, I think, between East and West. So, but Mikka did come on and got some minutes in this game on his debut. But I think an interesting move, given the depth at right back that we have. We're certainly not spare or like threadbare at that position. So it's an interesting transfer in that I'm not sure what it means for our other players in that position.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, now that I think about it, I'm glad it means that we don't have to shoehorn Drew Becky into that position.
Fair.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I would like to think it doesn't mean that Brian's position is under threat or that he may be departing the club, but
right.
But I mean, again, Mark is planning for the future, as he said. So we'll know in time what really these moves mean.
Yeah, all will become clear in time, I guess. The other big move that came in was the announcement of the signing of Brent Kallman on loan from Minnesota United FC. I was a little interested to hear obviously signing a defender on loan. And Brent comes with a couple of oddities, I guess, compared to other players. First off, being that last season he actually tested positive for a PED and served a 10-game suspension with Minnesota United. And then early this season on the bench, the team had decided to wear Black Lives Matter shirts pregame, also took a knee pregame in joining that protests and that bringing awareness to Black Lives Matter. Brent did not choose to kneel, and he also did not wear the same shirt. He chose to wear a different shirt that said "End Racism." Do you think that these issues that Brent comes in with could potentially cause any kind of problems, especially with him just joining for the rest of the season on loan? Yeah,
it's an interesting one, because we we just spoke with Mark last week about the kind of profile of player that he's looking for. And Mark always says that he's looking for character first and foremost, the technical quality and all that, was what he considers next. So, without trying to have a go at Mark here, it is a little bit interesting that we're loaning a guy who has some of these question marks on his resume, I guess you could say. Obviously, it's never a good thing when you test positive for a performance-enhancing substance. I mean, that's something that the MLS and the Players Association's CBA specifically outlines punishment for. So he was punished accordingly. And then, just with I want to be sensitive to our listeners. I know they don't, listen to us to hear, I guess you could call it politics. I don't think it's politics, but you know what I mean? But, yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit troubling that he wouldn't just, do what the rest of the team is doing in the name of team unity and team spirit, never mind what the shirt says or what it didn't say. I mean, if everyone's wearing, for example, at Arsenal, the captain traditionally picks whether the shirt that the team wears is short sleeve or long sleeve, just because everyone needs to be the same. We all need to be a team, be on the same page. I mean, yeah, it's symbolic, but it matters. And so these kind of things, I think if you're part of a team, just, go with it. I don't see what the big deal would have been to wear this shirt. So it's an interesting one for sure. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit relieved that we're not committing, a big contract to this player and he's just coming on loan. It could be an option for us down the stretch. But yeah, and now that I think about it, it is kind of odd too that we are, quote, planning for the future, but we're loaning this player. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Not to say that we're trying to throw this season, but it is a little interesting.
Yeah, it's a strange one, I think, in that he, we obviously have, cover at center back. I think of all positions we can use. Drew Becky can obviously, he's a center back primarily. Andrew Fox can certainly play center back, and did for most of last season. But I think the injuries maybe have caused Mark to see an opportunity and to add some depth. It's an interesting move though, for sure. And I think to your point about the statement, I guess, of Black Lives Matter, I think we now know that, making a statement like that is not inherently political because it's a statement statement equality. Like it's a statement of trying to encourage. It isn't
political. It shouldn't be.
It's human rights. So his choice to not wear the shirt to me is more of a statement than wearing the shirt to begin with. Like that's more of an inherent statement against the movement, which is not negative, so it just suggests that there's something there. But he is a very pedigreed center back. He's played 111 times for Minnesota United across two different divisions and iterations, I guess, of the club, both at the NASL level and now at MLS level. So a player who's done that and moved between levels and earned a contract with the higher tier. Like we see it when teams get promoted from Championship to Premier League. Like there's not many players that make that jump. They make a lot of signings, all of that. So he's certainly a tenured player. He has a lot of experience, and maybe he adds something in terms of depth, and maybe it's kind of seen as a risk-free move, I guess, from Mark because he is on loan. So if any nonsense does happen, then we can just terminate the loan and and go back to business as usual.
Sure. And I think I read somewhere that Minnesota United, I think maybe it was Jeff Ruder, had stated that they have pretty much an immediate recall option on the loan. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if United get hit with the injury bug, that he might be back sooner than we think. So interesting move nonetheless.
Yeah, shout out to Jeff actually for giving us the information that that Brent was had that recall clause, and then he is actually still under contract with Minnesota United for 2021 and 22, but it's a club option. So they could, in theory, not pick it up for next season, and he would be a free agent. And at that point, Locomotive might be able to make the deal permanent if it's good for both parties. But with his history, maybe a questionable move. Maybe he's trying to reform now. I'm not sure. But we'll see what kind of impact he does have on the team and what kind of minutes he sees, because right now we obviously do have kind of a settled pair in central defense. So I don't know about you, but I think it might take an injury for us to see Brent get a start.
Yeah, and I would hope so. I don't see any reason to break up the Chiro and Mishek partnership, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think they're perfectly solid and settled, and both second-year players. So yeah, I don't really want to see anyone kind of just jump ahead of them. So
especially on the heels of a clean sheet, which is what we will get into now. Real Monarchs is not our favorite place to go. I think after last season, 2 scoreless draws in the regular season, and then the unfortunate exit in the Western Conference Finals for Locomotive. The animosity that built at the end of last season, we spoke last episode about how it might not be there because of they had so much changeover in their roster. And I think Jack Blake really is like the only notable name that actually is still around Monarchs from last season's champions. But towards the end of the week, and as the game got closer, did that feeling still return of like, this is a chance for Locomotive, even though the players aren't really the same? And did some of that feeling kind of return for you pregame as a fan?
I didn't have the same feeling of like rage that I had during at the end of the Western Conference Final, but Real Monarchs is always kind of like the away games anyway are always kind of dreaded for me, just because we've had such a mixed bag there just in general in the regular season and of course last year in the postseason. So I mean, I knew that there were going to be, vastly different players, but yeah, I mean, you do think about the things that have happened there. So yeah, it was pretty much, I don't know how to explain it. I guess I'm not as angry as I was, but I always do dread playing them.
It is kind of it's a tough place to go, obviously. And I think our game there last year was so early in the season that it almost felt like it was 2 seasons ago, in terms of like iterations of this Locomotive team.
Absolutely.
So definitely we took a different team there last week than we took even to the Western Conference Final. But we saw a little bit of a difference from Locomotive, I think, in this match. And I want to hear from Nick Ross real quick, the goal scorer, on his thoughts on the performance against Monarchs in the win.
We maybe didn't play as well as we wanted to, but it's good to get the 3 points and keep the run going after getting 3 points against Colorado as well.
So didn't play as well as they wanted, but 1-0 on the road is kind of a perfect result, right? Like, I mean, a 1-0 on the road, there's something kind of satisfying about that.
Absolutely. I mean, you always want to get a clean sheet, first of all, and to get it on the road is huge. And against this team, where, like I said, we've kind of had a mixed bag of results. Like I probably mentioned last week on our last pod, it's hard to plan for these, MLS affiliated sides because of the turnover in players. But I think Nick's being a little harsh there. I thought that the result, all things considered, was very good.
We spoke about at the beginning of this game, similar lineup to what we had been seeing in terms of personnel, but the way that they were used may be slightly different in this one with possession. we spoke with Mark about how he's really fond of the 4-4-2 diamond, especially at home. I think we've seen him use that as his attacking formation. On the road, we've seen this trend maybe towards the 4-2-3-1. It's a very subtle difference between these. And we spoke right before we started recording about this, but really, do you think that he sends them out with the mentality of a different formation, or do you think he's sending individuals out with different roles?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think in general in the modern game, formations are just your starting point, but really it's a lot about roles and what the players are tasked with doing and the spaces that they are responsible for and the pressing triggers and all that kind of thing. So, a little bit of both, but yeah, with this one, I mean, the 4-2-3-1 works pretty well on the road. I think it gives us a little bit more attacking impetus because it is hard to score away from home. But we we kind of had to put Chapa, I guess, out onto the wing, which is always interesting. And you need to be a little bit more technically savvy in those areas. But I think he actually had a really great game and was rewarded for his performance last time out against Colorado Springs. So, yeah, I mean, Chapa's an excellent example of this question about roles. I think his role was very much pressing, marauding kind of that half space, making late runs, something that Nick Ross is very good at doing. And then Dylan Meyer is another very crucial role player in the side. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, the formation, it's a good starting point, but of course, as you see with and without possession, that can change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the key difference, I guess, with Chapa particularly is it seemed like Mark, when playing his three midfielders really were Chapa, Nick, and Richie. He chose to put Nick and Richie next to each other in midfield in the, more conservative roles, I guess, and gave Chapa a little bit more freedom. And it's nothing against Chapa, but I think it's because he trusts Nick and Richie to really fulfill those roles as much as possible, or as true to his kind of vision as possible. Chapa having that little bit of freedom, I think we saw him get into spaces where he isn't normally. And sure. I think that subtle difference actually shows itself very well in the goal, which we can talk about in a second. But in this one, despite having some very talented midfielders out there, we obviously, have raved about Dylan as well. But in the end, at this game, we're outpossessed, outpassed, and we actually make loads of clearances. I think 37 or something like that, clearances throughout this match as a team. So it's a departure in style for us. Do you think it's strictly just a product, like a byproduct of the situation and Mark adapting to the opposition? Or do you think it was in particular, like this game, Monarchs maybe got the better of us in terms of like how they passed around or how they were able to control the game? Do you think it was just kind of a us coming up against a really kind of good team, I guess?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we heard Mark tell us, the big focus this season was to score more goals. So I can only imagine that they're trying to really work on that in training and say, let's be a little bit more direct, not necessarily sacrificing our principles and our possession, but, there were times we were getting up the field with 3 passes,
right? And
that's not usually the Locomotive way, if you will. But I mean, at the same time, though, some of it was really mesmerizing to watch. Like it was straight up tiki-taka in some of these sequences. So I mean, maybe it is a little bit of a departure, but I'm not complaining about it. I think a little bit of directness is needed, especially with a team like ours where, we don't have that certified goal scorer, although it looks like Gomez can be that guy.
Yeah.
But of course, we need to spread the goals around. He can't be the one doing it week in, week out, even though I'm sure he probably could actually. But so yeah, it is a little bit of a departure. I mean, we get the win with less possession. We did the same thing against Colorado Springs. We were outpossessed and smashed them. So
right.
I mean, if we're just going to be a little bit more direct, then I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think the goal is a great microcosm of that, within the larger context of the game where we actually win the ball back fairly high up from a kind of a poor clearance. Andrew Fox cuts it out well. But then one of the things I think we kind of complained about last season quite often is when we would win the ball back, it seemed like we waited a lot. It seemed like we kind of dallied and waited for everything to kind of get into shape. And by that time, the other team is, reset, able to kind of react to what you're doing. This is almost the complete opposite. Fox immediately plays like an incisive forward pass. And it goes back to him eventually, then pass into Chapa, out to Gomez, and it's a beautifully worked goal. But that kind of taking the initiative and especially winning the ball high up the field and taking advantage of a situation like that, it seems like something that we didn't really do last season. And it definitely feels like a change in terms of being able and being willing to take a risk and play that kind of incisive first pass to start that attacking impetus in that counterattack and really get the ball rolling, so to speak. So, I mean, for you in this scoring this goal, I mean, it felt like a goal that we don't score last year.
Fair. Yeah, I think you're right. And you use the exact word for this move, which is incisive. I said last season a bunch of times, I mean, we get the ball back, we possess it a lot, but it's very pedestrian.
Right.
That seems to not be the case in these last two matches, at least. Which I recognize that's a small sample size, but I do think that there has been a shift in terms of being direct. And when I say direct, I hope it doesn't come off as lump the ball. That's not what we're doing. You can be direct in possession, which we saw with this goal. So yeah, I'm very much a fan of that. I think it allows the guys to express themselves a little bit more and show that they have that technical quality to just play it forward as soon as they win it back, win it high. And so yeah, I'm really pleased with it. And just want to give a shout out to Nick Ross, because we're always pegging him for a goal, but he still has to put that chance away because it kind of bobbled on him. I think it was technically like a half volley, don't you think?
Yeah, that's it takes a bounce, his first touch kind of sits up sort of oddly, it doesn't sit up beautifully for him to hit or anything. But he does so well to control that finish. I think it would have been very easy to shank that.
Right.
But he catches it clean and puts it right in the corner. And it was just, it was great to see. It was great to see Nick score, because we give him so much stick for, or just joke with him about the fact that he's hitting the woodwork a lot and he's just unlucky. I think even, this season, a couple of, world-class type saves have kept him out. And this time couldn't be denied. So it was great to see him get a goal specifically, but it's a great finish.
Yeah. And also #late runs. I love to see it.
Yeah.
Again, we just talked about formations and starting points, and Nick's starting point as part of a double pivot, in deep midfield. So to pop up there in the box for that goal is excellent. I love to see the midfielders making runs and helping out with the goal scoring. The
assist goes to Josue Aron Gomez, and obviously the ball in is good. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of. I don't even want to call it a cross. I think it technically is, in the sense that it's a ball from out wide into a central area, but it's played on the ground and it's played to the feet of Nick Ross. It's not played really, into an area for someone to attack.
Sure.
It's played with intent to
square ball.
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about Gomez is the fact that this season, we obviously knew that he has goals in him from last season. He scored at kind of a ridiculous rate at the end of last season. He's, up until this game, he had scored in the past 3, but he's also been involved in a lot of goals that haven't been his. And talking about Gomez as like an output king right now, like he is in terms of attacking, this guy is up there with Dylan in terms of being involved in the attacks that lead to goals.
Absolutely. I had a look at some of the advanced stats from our friends at Smarter Scout, and it's exactly what you said. Josue and Dylan are leading the team in terms of goal involvements and attacking output. I think when I last checked, Josue had 0.97 goal involvements per game, which is mental.
That's crazy.
That's a goal involvement a game. Like, let's just round that up. Know, he's, and again, the sample size is a little small. I mean, we're talking 7 games, but still, we thought that what he did last season, towards the end of last season, wouldn't be sustainable. Well, maybe we're wrong about that. Maybe he is really just going to be the star of this show. and the, even more so than the offensive output, which of course I love, is that he's such a team player. I mean, he looks just as happy for someone else to score than for him to score. Right. He chases down a lot of balls that go into areas where he probably could just let it run. I just really like watching him play. He's the ultimate team player, and he shows up on the score sheet. And what more can you ask for?
Yeah, I think he's been more than what we expected in terms of. I think we expected him to get in the team and get some goals. But in terms of his involvement in the buildup, he's been a amazing asset as well. And in this case gets the assist. The pass that leads to Gomez having the opportunity to provide the assist, it comes from Chapa, in an area where I honestly thought that it was Dylan playing the pass initially.
Yeah.
And that's a compliment to Chapa. I want to make that clear, because we obviously think very highly of Dylan Mara's. Chapa, the one who plays the quote unquote hockey assist in this one, the pass before the pass, but he drops into kind of a Nick Ross area in the build up to this goal and provides that pass. Do we owe some apologies to Chapa after the past couple of performances? I mean, we've obviously in the past expressed maybe some concern around some of his performances, but in this one again, he's central to the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can never question Chapa's effort and his work rate in any performance, whether it was a good or a quote bad performance. This season, it seems like he's come on in leaps and bounds as far as the technical side of the game is concerned. Like you said, he pops up in like this playmakers area, kind of a little off to the half space there. And it is a place where you'd find Dylan Mara is playing in one of those balls. But I mean, fair play to Chapa. He's been fantastic recently. And I think, myself, I was probably guilty of, I guess, maybe pigeonholing him a little bit, saying, he's kind of that water carrier midfielder, just very industrious. But if we play him further forward, it seems like he has the quality to get on the score sheet as well. So, with a pre-assist, he doesn't make it on there, but the XA chain is lit. So,
yeah, that's he's shown up in the advanced stats for sure. And I mean, the player who's normally been involved in all of these goals and actually kind of miraculously for some reason isn't involved in the buildup to this one, Dylan Mara's. We've spoken about his importance and maybe expressed some concern about the fact that he's so central to everything that we do. quite literally as a central attacking midfielder. But he's so central to everything that we do in an attacking sense that, I mean, we started to worry about his load in terms of minutes played and all of this. Is it refreshing, I guess, to see a goal that doesn't involve him so that we can see that is possible indeed?
Yeah, it is. I guess it is a good thing that he's not involved in this one, because it means that they're sharing the responsibility for creating. But he did have a really good chance in the 23rd minute with that free kick.
Yeah.
And forcing the keeper to make a save down low, so that it could have been 2-0, but wasn't to be this time for Dylan. But I mean, and it brings me back to kind of what Mark was talking about, is his work rate. So I think Mark must feel comfortable playing him as often as he does, because even if he doesn't show up on the score sheet, he's still going to put in the defensive work for you. So
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm really liking what we're seeing out of the midfielders just in general this season, and in creating, in pressing, getting forward and trying to make things happen, instead of just, okay, well, I'm going to, I don't want to take responsibility for this. Let me pass it to Yuma or whoever, or Richie, or
right.
It seems like everyone wants to lead on the pitch, and I like that.
Yeah. And I mean, having that threat from set pieces too is always so vital. I think we're not used to seeing free kicks put on goal.
No, and every time he gets one now, I'm like, oh, this is a chance.
Yeah.
Like I mean, to have that specialist in the side is awesome. I mean, because it's just another way for us to score. We used to roll our eyes at set pieces, but now it's something to pay attention to with Mars in the side. Yeah,
and he's a threat from kind of everywhere out. I mean, it doesn't really matter how far out he is. He'll still have a go, and he's forced a couple of good saves. So, and then obviously the goal a couple of weeks ago. But the key to this win, obviously, is the clean sheet, because it is just the one goal in the end. And despite the fact that Monarchs technically outshoot and outcreate Locomotive, one of the biggest hallmarks of this particular clean sheet, I think, is the limiting of Monarchs' like big chances. We've seen in the past this season, we've seen Locomotive give up some pretty high quality chances. I mean, especially, New Mexico, like, basically gives me nightmares in terms of the free shots at goal that they were having. In this one, I mean, Monarchs didn't really have that like clean look at goal that we've been giving up this season. Yeah. We really restricted Monarchs to kind of like long shots and tight angles, pretty much those low XG chances, really, to get us the clean sheet. They did give us a little bit of trouble with some of the long throw-ins. I don't know that we're necessarily used to that, or if we work on that at all. I mean, it's such a peculiar thing for a side to do long throw. I mean, Liverpool is a throw-in coach, so maybe not. Yeah. But they gave us a little bit of trouble with those. But overall, like in open play, really, I don't recall any clear chance that they had like in the box or from an area where they could realistically score. It was all just pot shots and what have you. So, credit to the defense for that, and for, the whole team really to keep our shape in those positions and in those areas. And of course I'm pleased for Logan to get a clean sheet, especially on the road. He did have, one or two shaky moments. There was a part of the second half, I think, where he came out of his box to claim the ball and it kind of bounced on him. Right. So that was a little bit scary, but I mean, he gets away with it. So, so yeah, fair play to him. And one thing too, I think Monarchs were getting very frustrated, especially in the second half. They end up getting 4 yellow cards in the game. Yeah. And Jack Blake, I feel like he could have seen red a couple times. Yeah. So, a couple of shocking challenges, quite honestly, from Jack Blake. Yeah. I think he may come into the conversation a little bit later with his performance on the night. But yeah, you mentioned Logan kind of, I think he ends up actually the highest rated player on FOTMob's ratings, 8.3, with 4 saves, keeps a clean sheet. Obviously a good night, in terms of doing what he had to. But it is, I think, worth mentioning that, when a keeper is given license to kind of roam and play as a sweeper a little bit, as we've seen Logan do, he comes out, he plays the ball. He's able to do that. We saw last season, it came back to bite him a handful of times, maybe that's even too many, but a few times it did come back to bite him. So I think it's something that he's still developing in his game. He's obviously a fantastic shot stopper. I think he controls the box quite well in terms of like crosses in, normally comes to claim them, all of that. But I think the one area where Logan is not like the complete package yet, like to where he could literally be, maybe one of the best keepers, like at this level period, is just that, what Mark's asked him to do in terms of coming off his line. I think it's just a decision making. But it seems with experience, he is getting better. It's just a matter of kind of refining that further. I think that really is what it comes down to. But we did see a couple times in this game, a couple of iffy moments in terms of that decision making.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the decision making is something that will need to improve, but I mean that can only improve with experience. And I know that there are going to be some people who say, "Oh, why does the keeper do that? Like, just stop coming out, just shot stop. That's what you're there for." But that's, I mean, they've asked the same things about to Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp about their 2 Brazilian keepers. Why do you allow them to do this? And it has bitten them in the ass a few times with Ederson and Alisson. But the reason why is because it's worth it.
Right.
When your keeper can offer that to you when they're good on the ball, it's worth it in terms of the distribution and creating chances. I mean, Alisson has an assist like this season, did he not? So I mean, it's worth it, especially for a team like ours that play that kind of possession style. So yeah, I mean, 1 or 2 shaky moments, but I'm not gonna ask him to just stop doing that. I think that we just need to continue. I mean, he just needs to improve on that. And he's already quite good with the ball. So yeah, I mean, for people who are wondering why isn't our keeper just shot stopping, it's because, modern keepers are expected to do all of these things for the most part.
For sure. And I think when people point to our back four, I think ultimately the way that we play is quite risky as well, because, we have 2 fullbacks that are both getting up the field. And there's potential, as we saw against Phoenix, there's potential for that to backfire. The Asante goal, essentially comes with Fox caught upfield because we turned the ball over. And then we play a pretty high line compared to a lot of other teams in USL. We're certainly not dropping deep, but we also have, Chiro is not the quickest center back. I would say Mishak isn't that quick either. They're both very good at positional play, which is obviously key. But I think they kind of require that added layer of the keeper is going to be in behind to clear a ball out over the top that does get in behind them. So I think Logan's going to be continued to be asked to do that. And as you said, that's kind of the expectation of top keepers, across the game right now. And I think it's something that Logan has improved, but certainly a little bit of room there to get better, just in terms of when to commit, and being decisive in those moments where he does come off his line, and making the impact. 'Cause there were a couple of moments that I was a little nervous, but ultimately it is a clean sheet, and I think it's a really good clean sheet for this defense, because they obviously pride themselves on their defensive abilities. Last season, one of the best defensive teams in USL, period, in terms of clean sheets. And they hadn't really showed that up to this point. How much of a boost do you think it is to the team to keep this clean sheet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge for the team, especially on the road. And we're actually not. I think we're like tied for 5th right now in terms of clean sheets this season with 3. So I mean, not too shabby this season either. And I'm sure that they'll want to continue that. It's good for the whole team. Really, a clean sheet is not, most of the time it's not just your keeper; it's the whole team are in that clean sheet. So So yeah, I'm sure they're thrilled.
So as we head into the tail end of this, who for you is the game changer in this match for Locomotive?
Oh, this is tough because I feel like this was such a quintessential team performance. I feel like no one had a bad game.
No, and I think
fair to say.
I think it is actually based on because normally FOTMob will just rake players over the coals for almost no reason, and there was no Locomotive player below a 6, and in fact, no Locomotive player below a 6.5, and 4 players were above 7. So out of 10.
Just a good day at the office.
Yeah. 4 outfield players. That's not counting Logan with the 8.3. So
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
4 of 10 outfield players above a 7. Both fullbacks as well. So that's
there you go.
This is Mark at his finest. Both fullbacks, a midfielder, and his striker above a 7.
Exactly. I guess I would give it to Nick Ross just because we have to put some respect on his name for the goal. And also, again, from where he started from, he's a defensive midfielder in this setup, and he pops up for the goal away. It's a good night for him. So I guess I'd give it to him, but I really do think that the whole team performed very well.
Yeah. I think as you said, like it really is a team performance. I'm gonna just give a shout out. I'm just gonna take this opportunity to shout out Andrew Fox. He starts the move for the goal. He also does a ton of work defensively. He had three tackles in the game as well, which is kind of rare for him. He doesn't normally need to do much tackling because of his role in the team as a more attacking player, but did well on both sides of the ball, and just that ability to make that incisive pass and really get things started down the left wing. I think it's a hallmark of what Mark is trying to do with this team, and I think it's indicative of kind of the type of goal that he really wants to score. So I just credit Andrew Fox for kind of having the right mentality and the right decision making in that moment. I don't know about game changer because it's just everybody, as you said, was a game changer, but Foxy I think has just come on so far as in this crazy kind of left wing back role that we have him playing. He's adapted really well to it and really come on in leaps and bounds like very quickly, it seems like.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely fair.
So that leaves us with that 1-0 win. It puts USL Championships return to play Group C. Keeps it tight at the top. New Mexico United still top with a 1-0 win over Switchbacks. They're on 13 points, having played 7. Locomotive on 11 points, having played the same number. Real Monarchs fall to 3rd and on 4 points, so 7 behind Locomotive, but they have 2 games in hand, which makes things a little tricky in terms of this return to play, because they do have 6 points they could make up with those 2 games in hand, and then Switchbacks with just a single game in hand, also with 4 points, so they sit bottom of the table right now. Locomotive's next opponents, but we do have maybe a tidbit of news here, as Locomotive have been looking for some reinforcements. We know that Gomez, Mahrez really in good form these days, but we know that there's going to be times where we need some depth at some of these positions. Fox, another good shout for this, but there was a little bit of potential news on the Bravos front, I guess. And I don't know if you want to walk us through this, Mikka, but I know we talked about it a little last week, but this transfer saga that's been Leandro Cahijo and Eder Borelli.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see across Locomotive Twitter and Facebook, people have been wondering when are they going to make their debuts. And of course, Mark did update us that, it's the whole visa process takes a while. I mean, try immigrating to this country sometime and you will learn. But seriously, Loco understands that this visa process is sounds like it's coming to a conclusion, and that both Cahijo and Borelli should be ready to play imminently. I think look out for an official announcement from the club on that front. But yeah, I think that's the scoop for this week, and hopefully we'll see them make their debuts in the blue of Locomotive shortly.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting move because of what Mark said last week on the podcast. I think it's pretty clear the role that he sees for Cahijo as a super sub. He sees him as the guy. He literally said 75th minute, which is such a Mark time to make a substitution. I mean,
yes, no, it is. Or 60.
Yeah, 60 and 75, and that's it. And then maybe stoppage time. If he uses that third instance. But
yes.
No, it is so. It could be a huge reinforcement, though, in terms of like some of these games, if we're tiring at the end or if we really need a goal. I mean, that's quite the player to be able to toss on at 75.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty insane. There have been people, throughout the USL sphere who are saying this guy could be the player of the league. I mean,
right.
He has scored so many goals in Ascenso, and I really don't think that he's going to find it hard to score in USL either. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. I pressed Mark on whether we can expect more technique from this player, which I think he said that we could, as far as, comparisons to Mario Lomis and what have you. But Leandro is going to be a very interesting one for us.
Could be some big reinforcements into this game coming up against Colorado Springs Switchbacks, I should say. So Switchbacks, we're traveling to Colorado this time, and they're coming off another close loss against New Mexico United. Chris Wehan somehow scoring again because he's just having the most ridiculous return to play maybe ever. I don't know, like the return has just been insane from Chris Wehan, but are Colorado Springs like a little unlucky to be where they are? I mean, they've had all of these very close results, and the only game where they've really been beaten soundly was in El Paso. What do you make of that? Like, is it just we had the best game plan to deal with them? Did we catch them on a good day? Like, what is this Switchbacks team, and why do they give everybody fits and then we handled them pretty easily?
I don't know. I mean, they're so hard to get a grip on. Like you said, they've been hanging on in some of these matches and lost or drew unfairly. I think they haven't won a match since March 7th, like when the actual season started.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, like you said, they lost 1-0 to New Mexico United last time out. I think, with that, New Mexico United they're just inevitable sometimes, and it's extremely annoying. But with us, they didn't play poorly, and yet they conceded 4 goals. So it's an odd one. Like I wish I had more like analytical insight on them, but they're just a weird side. I don't know. Maybe it's just the turnover in the squad, or I think they have a couple injuries, so that could also be playing into it, but it's just a weird one for them. I kind of feel a little bit bad because it's more of the same of last season. They really didn't have a great season last year either. So
right. I mean, it really was a weird one against us as well. Obviously, I mean, Locomotive score the 4 goals, a brace from Chapa, but Uvaldo Luna comes on at halftime and then ends up scoring 2 goals, late on to kind of pull the scoreline back into maybe, a less embarrassing position for Switchbacks. But do you think going on the road this time, obviously it's a little different going to Colorado Springs versus them coming to Southwest University Park. Do you think we see a similar setup? And this question was asked by a couple of listeners, Jay Konecki and Patrick Ariola. Do you think we see a similar setup to the one that we saw in Salt Lake City, or in Harriman, I guess, against Real Monarchs? Do we see a similar setup, maybe even the same lineup? Do you think Mark goes unchanged going on the road, or do you think he maybe adjusts for Switchbacks versus the game against Monarchs?
I think we see the same system, more or less, but I think maybe there might be 1 or 2 pieces moving out of the starting lineup. I think, I would assume Richie would come back into the fold. Is he injured? Why? I think he was just being rested, right?
Oh, when he came off, let me check. I don't think.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I don't think he's hurt.
What am I thinking of? Because Richie didn't start against Real Monarchs, correct? It was Yuma alongside Nick Ross.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was Yuma. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay.
And if hold on, am I?
Because Richie wasn't in the
Richie wasn't in the squad at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would assume if he was just, being rested, that he should come back into the lineup. Because he doesn't really miss a lot of games as is. So,
right.
But yeah, no. To answer the question, yeah, I think we probably go 4-2-3-1 again and just have some players rotate.
Sure.
I would like to see Distel make a start, but then again, like none of these midfielders have done anything to warrant being dropped, so It's kind of an odd one. But we shall see.
Yeah, it is a little strange. There's no one who stood out to me. Obviously, I mean, we said that it was a great team performance. There's no one who stands out as needing to be dropped. I think we always will see Richie preferred in the side as long as he's able to play. And if he was being rested against Monarchs, then I'm almost certain that he starts in Colorado. The only question marks, I guess, is obviously Omar starts against Monarchs. Do you think we see Omar again? Could Saeed Robinson maybe make his way into the starting lineup? Do you think there's any leeway there?
Well, that is an interesting shout because, as Mark told us last week, he likes to play players against their old sides.
Yeah,
a little bit petty there, but that's okay. No. Maybe we see Saeed out wide, but from what we could see from the training pictures and stuff, Omar's training just fine, and we know that he's never really had issues in his Locomotive tenure with his fitness. So
no,
and he plays really well against switchbacks. So maybe that's one that we don't change. So
yeah. I mean, if anything, it's the opposition that struggle with Omar's fitness. He doesn't struggle. He doesn't struggle with fitness at all. So I'd say, I mean, and as especially I think in terms of just trying to keep the side fresh. I mean, Chapa maybe could rotate out. Yuma might rotate out. But I don't know that there's wholesale changes to the squad, barring injuries. I really don't think that we see a massive change. And Mark always does love to be able to provide, last season he always spoke about he never really had the chance to play like two of the same lineups back to back,
Sure.
just due to the injuries. And I think now he's got the luxury of not needing to do something like that. And I think he prefers the rotation, especially in midfield, of keeping like fresh legs in there. So we'll see, I guess. But I agree with you that I think he probably uses the same system. It's just a matter of what pieces he plugs in, and we probably see Richie come back. For this one, though, I mean, who do you think is the key against this switchback side for Locomotive? Is there any one player that you look at and just say, like, this is the person who needs to be on form for us to get a result in Colorado?
I don't know. I don't know if I could single anyone out, at least not based on the Real Monarchs performance. I mean, of course, we did play switchbacks just the fixture prior. I think that the attack really, as a unit, the attacking unit needs to be, firing on all cylinders, because switchbacks are a 32nd defense in the league.
Right.
They're pretty abject as far as conceding goals. So we need to capitalize on that like we did last time out. I don't know if there's anyone I'd single out necessarily. I think they all have a part to play, especially, going to switchbacks, going on the road, and having to pick up, having to play in a pretty tough environment. Not necessarily because there's going to be like a bunch of rabid fans there, but I mean, another high altitude area and what have you. So yeah, I think just the attack in general, whoever comes in to start that match will need to be on it from the whistle.
Yeah. I think I think that's a really good shot. I think for me, I'll just highlight what you said earlier. And Omar normally has really good games against Colorado, and so sure. I would just look for him to maybe terrorize and stretch that back line, and provide some opportunities for other players to make runs, and hopefully he can get on the end of something himself, because I know he's probably desperate for goals at this point. He hasn't scored since the United game. Gosh, it's been a couple like a month ago now. So I'm sure he's hungry to score, and it would be. I was hoping he would get one in against Monarchs, but just as a little bit of revenge, wasn't in the cards, unfortunately. Although I do think he played decently well. He didn't have a goal to his name, so I'm sure he's still hungry for one. But I think overall the goal for Locomotive has to be keep a second consecutive clean sheet. Like another road clean sheet would be such a boost. And really kind of in a lot of ways get this team back to what it did so well at the beginning of last season, where we just did not concede goals on the road for a really long time. We were doing a really good job of at least drawing on the road. And so if we can kind of continue this and turn it from this one-off clean sheet into kind of a streak, it might, I think it would just do wonders for the team in terms of when we come up to these. I don't want to look past Colorado Springs or anything like that, but when we get back into matchups like New Mexico, maybe the defense plays with a little bit more confidence in a game like that, if they've got a little bit of a streak going.
Yeah, absolutely. It is important to build that confidence against sides that you probably should be beating. That way, when you're, up against a side that's probably better than you, at least as far as history tells us, right, that you can maybe get one on them.
And finally, I mean, is there anyone from Switchbacks that stands out to you as a player to watch going into this one? And one to maybe for Locomotive to maybe key on.
Yeah, I mean, this switchback side is a young side. They've got a couple interesting players. They seem to be spreading out the goal involvements. There's not any one danger man, but I look at Joan Servos, the Andorran,
Yep.
and Austin Dewing. I think he's got 2 assists. So they've got creative players in there. It's just if you look at the stats, they miss a lot of big chances and they don't create enough big chances anyway. So to be missing what little ones you do get is pretty painful.
Right.
And they concede, quite a bit. But I probably looked at those two, both young players in their early 20s who are expected to kind of be the creative output for the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll point to, and this is like the worst version of recency bias and just what we've seen in front of us. But I mean, Luna gets the 2 goals for Colorado Springs against us, and I think the thing about that game that was so kind of striking to me is the fact that Colorado Springs were much better after halftime, despite the fact that they concede twice.
Right.
Or 3 times. Wait, 3 times? Did 3 of the goals come in the second half?
Let's see.
No, Chapa and hold on.
two in the second, 2 in the first.
Yeah, because Gomez off the press in the first. Yeah.
Yes.
So despite the fact that they kind of give up that quick fire double, they were much better in the second half after those substitutions. And there was a little bit of a change of system, it felt like, because they came out with like a 5-4-1 or something like that, like however you want to describe it. But they basically tossed Valesky up front and just chucked the ball into the box as much as possible. And it didn't really come off for them. It didn't work out. Second half, they kind of changed the system a little bit, and it actually caused us some problems, even though, the scoreline obviously ended up favoring us quite heavily. So those subs, I don't know if maybe Colorado learns a lesson against us and maybe comes out with a different system to try to counter what we're doing. So those are kind of the players I'm keeping an eye on just because they did make such an impact when they came on against us.
Yeah, and if I were scouting the opposition for them, I would try to shy away from 3 at the back, because you take that extra man out of midfield and allow us to dominate midfield. It's not going to be great for you.
Right.
So, just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, against Colorado Springs, the thing that they were able to do is they were able to use those wing backs to really limit the involvement of our fullbacks in attack.
True.
But it left, as you said, the middle much more open, and the 2 goals that, the 2 goals that are scored, from open play, I'll say, just because Gomez obviously, creates off an error. The 2 Chapa goals are really created by the space that exists in midfield. Yeah. So, it's not from wide areas that we're creating those goals. So I think they'll probably try to gunk up the midfield a little bit more in this one, and maybe try to force us to play wider, which I guess in this last game we showed that we can play around that as well. So there's maybe we're figuring out, maybe we're becoming that team that can solve problems like mid game, and find ways around or through teams. But I think we see a different setup from Colorado in this one than what we saw in the last. Yeah,
for sure. I hope that we can get 3 in a row. That would be very, very nice indeed.
Yeah. Any predictions? We don't have our full crew, so we'll have to consolidate these post pod, but your prediction for the score and goal scorer as we head out of this one.
I'm going to go with 2-0. I will predict another clean sheet. And I say Omar Salgado gets himself a cheeky goal.
I like it. Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to get back on the board with these predictions. Trying to climb my way up the table. I think I'm gonna go. I do like the idea of another clean sheet. But I think I'm going to go 2-1 just to differentiate slightly. It's still the win, but I think I'm
2-1 at first, but yeah.
But I think I'm going to say, it's become quite predictable at this point. But then Ross is the scorer in the last one, so it's not that simple. But gosh, I think I gotta go. I think I gotta go for a Gomez goal, as unoriginal as that might be. I think the output god just keeps outputting.
Yeah, you didn't want to say that the other way around, right?
Yeah,
no, I mean it's a fair prediction to make. The stats certainly support it, but yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be a good match. I like going to Switchbacks away. Good memories of playing up there, so it'll be a good one.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. It is a chance for Locomotive to put some more pressure on New Mexico United at the top of Group C as well, and distance themselves from the chasing pack. Try to solidify that playoff spot as early as possible, although it is still very early. Well, I guess we're about halfway through the return to play.
Yeah, oh my God.
Almost halfway. So if you guys have enjoyed, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all options. And if your platform gives you the chance to leave a review, we'd love it if you left us a nice little review. It helps us out and helps more people see what we're putting out. And you can also follow us on our social media, primarily Twitter. We're doing most of our business these days at Seriously Loco. Until next time, stay loco. Keeping it mellow for the outro,